Welcome, enlightened ones. Let's elevate. You know what's interesting? A lot of people walk around frustrated, confused, exhausted, feeling unseen, feeling taken for granted, and they keep asking the same quiet question inside themselves. Why do people keep treating me like this? Why do they keep crossing my boundaries? Why do they speak to me any kind of way? Why do they disappear and reappear? Why do they assume access to me? Why do they feel so comfortable doing the bare minimum? And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. But you're ready to hear it. Because you didn't find this by accident. People treat you the way you teach them to treat you. Not with your words, with your energy, with your tolerance, with what you excuse, with what you allow to repeat, with what you stay silent about, with what you accept just to keep the peace. And I'm not saying this to blame you, I'm saying this to empower you, because the moment you realize you've been teaching them is the moment you realize you can change the lesson. You see, every interaction is a classroom, every relationship is a syllabus, and whether you're conscious of it or not, you are always instructing people how to engage with you. When you laugh something off that hurt you, you taught them you'll tolerate disrespect. When you respond instantly to someone who ignores you for days, you taught them your time is flexible and disposable. When you keep explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you taught them they don't have to listen the first time. When you forgive without accountability, you taught them apologies don't need change. When you stay after being shown who someone is, you taught them access to you has no requirements. And listen to me clearly. This is not about being harsh. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about punishing people. This is about alignment. This is about self-respect becoming louder than your fear of being alone. Because a lot of people aren't afraid of mistreating you. They're confident you'll stay. They're confident you'll adjust. They're confident you'll understand. They're confident you'll overextend. They're confident you'll silence yourself. They're confident you'll doubt yourself before you doubt them. And that confidence didn't come from nowhere. It was built brick by brick, moment by moment. Every time you swallowed your truth, every time you chose comfort over clarity, every time you prioritized harmony over honesty, every time you abandoned yourself to keep someone else. But here's the shift. The moment you stop negotiating your worth, people feel it. The moment your no becomes complete, not shaky, not guilty, not overexplained, complete. The dynamic changes, because boundaries don't require force. They require consistency. You don't have to announce your standards. You embody them. You don't have to threaten consequences. You follow through quietly. You don't have to convince people to value you. You value yourself so deeply that mistreatment feels out of place. And the people who are benefiting from your lack of boundaries, they will resist. They will test you. They will accuse you of changing. They will say you're different now. They will say you're distant. They will say you're difficult. They will say you've become cold. No, you've become clear. You've become unavailable for chaos. You've become loyal to yourself. And let me tell you something most people don't realize until much later. When someone reacts negatively to your boundaries, they're not upset about losing you. They're upset about losing access to the version of you they could control, the version of you that overgave, the version of you that overexplained, the version of you that stayed quiet, the version of you that made it easy for them to do less. And that version of you is retired. You don't teach people how to treat you by lecturing them. You teach them by what you stop allowing, by what you walk away from without needing the last word, by what you no longer chase, by what you no longer tolerate just because it's familiar. Because familiarity is dangerous when it's attached to disrespect. Let me say that again. Familiarity is dangerous when it's attached to disrespect. Just because you've known someone a long time doesn't mean they get lifetime access. Just because you've invested energy doesn't mean you keep pouring into a cracked container. Just because you love someone doesn't mean you abandon yourself. Real love doesn't require self-erasure. Real connection doesn't require self-betrayal. And the moment you decide that your peace is non-negotiable, Your standards will offend people who were comfortable with your suffering. That's okay. That's part of the lesson. Some people are only comfortable with you when you're easy to misuse. And when you stop being that, they reveal themselves. Your job isn't to chase their understanding. Your job is to honor your knowing. Because you know when something feels off. You know when you're being drained. You know when effort isn't being matched. You know when words and actions don't align. You've always known. You just used to override it. You just used to minimize it. You just used to give people more grace than you gave yourself. But that era is ending. You don't need permission to expect respect. You don't need validation to enforce boundaries. You don't need approval to choose yourself. Teaching people how to treat you starts internally. It starts when you stop arguing with your intuition. It starts when you stop calling your needs too much. It starts when you stop romanticizing inconsistency. It starts when you stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. It starts when you stop explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. Because the truth is, people who value you don't need to be taught how to treat you. They already know. They adjust naturally. They listen the first time. They respect your no. They don't push your limits just to see how far they can go. They don't disappear and expect you to wait. They don't test your boundaries like a game. And when someone repeatedly shows you they don't respect you, that's the lesson. Not for them, for you. The lesson is discernment. The lesson is detachment. The lesson is choosing alignment over attachment. And here's the part that changes everything. When you raise your standards, you don't lose people who are meant for you. You lose people who were feeding off the version of you that didn't know their worth. And that loss creates space. Space for healthier connections. Space for mutual respect. Space for ease. Space for reciprocity. Space for peace. You don't need to become someone else to be treated better. You need to stop shrinking who you already are. You need to stop softening your boundaries to make others comfortable. You need to stop dimming your expectations out of fear of being alone. Because being alone with your self-respect is better than being surrounded by people who drain you. And once you truly internalize that, everything shifts. Your posture changes, your tone changes, your presence changes, and people feel it before you ever say a word. This is the beginning of teaching people how to treat you, not through confrontation, but through embodiment, through self-respect that doesn't ask for permission, through boundaries that don't wobble, through peace that isn't up for negotiation. And we're just getting started. You're still here. That matters. Because the people who leave when the truth gets uncomfortable were never ready to change the lesson anyway. So let's go deeper. Because teaching people how to treat you isn't a moment. It's a decision you make again and again, especially when it costs you something, especially when your old patterns start whispering, especially when loneliness tries to negotiate with you. Here's where most people slip. They hear the truth. They feel empowered. They draw a boundary. And then they get uncomfortable with the aftermath, the silence, the distance, the shift in energy. And suddenly they start questioning themselves. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should explain one more time. Maybe I should soften it. Maybe I should reach out. And just like that, the lesson collapses. Not because the boundary was wrong, but because it wasn't held. You have to understand this. People don't learn your standards from the first boundary. They learn from the second one, and the third, and the moment when you don't backtrack. That's when it becomes real. That's when they realize you're not performing self-respect. You're practicing it. A lot of people are only brave with boundaries when there's no risk, when they don't care about the person, when the connection is already fading. But the real work, the transformative work, is holding your line with the people you love, the people you're attached to, the people who have history with you, the people who benefited the most from the old version of you. Because those are the ones who will test you hardest. They'll say things like, "You're being dramatic. You've changed. It wasn't that serious. You're too sensitive. I didn't mean it like that. I guess I can't say anything to you anymore." And if you're not grounded in yourself, you'll start shrinking again. You'll start over-explaining. You'll start managing their emotions. You'll start translating your boundary into something easier for them to swallow. But hear me. Your boundary is not supposed to be comfortable for someone who was crossing it. Discomfort is part of the recalibration. Let them sit in it. Let them feel the absence of the old access. Let them adjust or remove themselves. Either way, you win. Because teaching people how to treat you means you stop rescuing them from the consequences of their behavior. That's where many of you struggle. You see someone realize they might lose you, and you rush to reassure them. You see someone feel the distance, and you rush to close the gap. You feel the silence, and you rush to fill it. But silence is a teacher. Distance is a teacher. Loss of access is a teacher. And when you interrupt the lesson, you delay the growth, for them, and for you. You are not responsible for making other people comfortable with your self-respect. Read that again in your spirit. You are not responsible for making other people comfortable with your self-respect. Some people will only respect you at a distance. Some people will only behave when access is limited. Some people will never rise to the standard. And that's not your failure. That's your clarity. Here's another truth. You teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself when no one is watching. When you stay up late overthinking conversations, when you replay moments where you felt small, when you invalidate your own feelings, when you gaslight yourself into believing you're asking for too much. That internal dialogue leaks outward. People feel it. They sense when you don't fully believe you deserve better. And some will take advantage of that. Not because they're evil, but because they're unconscious. And unconscious people will always take as much as you allow. That's why self-respect isn't loud. It's steady. It's quiet confidence. It's the way you don't chase closure. It's the way you don't beg for clarity. It's the way you stop auditioning for effort. It's the way you let people be exactly who they are, and then decide what that means for your access. You don't need to punish anyone. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove a point. You just need to choose accordingly. And that choice, repeated consistently, is the lesson. Some of you are still trying to teach people how to treat you using words alone. Long messages, heartfelt explanations, carefully crafted conversations. And communication is important. But communication without consequences is just noise. If someone hears you, acknowledges you, and then does the same thing again, they heard you. They just didn't respect you. So stop repeating yourself. Repetition doesn't build respect. Alignment does. Action does. Follow through does. This is where your power lives. Not in how clearly you explain, but in how firmly you choose. And yes, you will lose people, not everyone, but the ones who were only there because you made it easy for them to show up halfway. And that loss will sting at first. Because you're human, because attachment doesn't dissolve overnight, because your nervous system was used to chaos, inconsistency, and emotional labor. Peace can feel unfamiliar at first, but unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. It means new. And you are building something new now. A new baseline, a new standard, a new relationship with yourself. One where you don't abandon yourself at the first sign of discomfort. One where your boundaries are an extension of your self-love, not a defense mechanism. One where you understand that being chosen starts with choosing yourself. Teaching people how to treat you isn't about controlling them. It's about controlling your participation. Who gets access? Who gets energy? Who gets explanations? Who gets your time? Who gets another chance? And who gets released? Without drama, without hatred, without guilt, just clarity, just truth, just self-respect in motion. You are not here to be easy to misuse. You are here to be honored. And the more you honor yourself, the clearer the lesson becomes. We're not done yet. Stay with me. Because this is where the internal shift becomes visible. This is where people really start noticing. Not because you announced anything, not because you made a speech, but because your behavior no longer matches the old version they memorized. Here's the part nobody prepares you for. When you truly start teaching people how to treat you, you will disappoint them. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped doing what benefited them at your expense. And disappointment from others can feel like danger when you've been conditioned to please. Your body might react, your thoughts might spiral, you might feel the urge to fix it, smooth it over, make it okay again. But let me tell you something with clarity and care. You are allowed to disappoint people who were comfortable disappointing you. That discomfort you feel when you hold your boundary, that's not guilt. That's withdrawal from self-abandonment. You're breaking a habit. And habits don't release you quietly. They protest. They whisper familiar fears. You'll lose them. You'll be alone. You're being too much. You're overreacting. No, you're evolving. And evolution always costs you the skin you've outgrown. Here's another truth you need to anchor into. Not everyone deserves access to the healed version of you. Some people only knew how to relate to you through your wounds, through your overgiving, through your patience without limits, through your forgiveness without change. And when those doors close, they don't know how to meet you anymore. That's not cruelty. That's incompatibility. You're not obligated to remain relatable by staying wounded. You're not obligated to stay reachable by staying available. You're not obligated to stay kind by staying quiet. Kindness without boundaries is self-betrayal. And self-betrayal teaches people that you'll always be the one to bend. But you're not bending anymore. You're standing. And standing still feels aggressive to people who expected you to kneel. Teaching people how to treat you also means releasing the fantasy that everyone will understand. They won't. Some will misunderstand you on purpose. Some will twist your intentions to avoid accountability. Some will paint you as the villain because it's easier than looking in the mirror. Let them. Your clarity does not require their comprehension. You don't need to correct every narrative. You don't need to defend your growth. You don't need to explain your healing to people who benefited from your pain. Silence is not weakness when it's rooted in self-trust. Silence is discernment. Silence is power. Silence is you choosing peace over performance. There's something else that changes when you teach people how to treat you. Your standards stop being negotiable based on mood. You don't enforce boundaries only when you're exhausted. You don't speak up only when you've reached your breaking point. You don't wait until resentment builds. You address things earlier, cleaner, calmer, with less emotion and more certainty. Because certainty doesn't need volume. Certainty doesn't shake. Certainty doesn't beg. Certainty doesn't chase. It just is. And that energy? It rewires your relationships. Some people rise, they adjust, they respect you more, they show up differently. Those are aligned connections. Others fall away. They resist, they push back, they withdraw, they disappear. Those were conditional connections. Both outcomes are information. Both outcomes are valuable. Neither requires you to chase or convince. You are not here to manage how people respond to your boundaries. You are here to honor them. Let's talk about the fear underneath all of this. The fear of being alone. Because that's what keeps so many people tolerating disrespect. They're not weak. They're afraid. Afraid that choosing themselves means losing connection. Afraid that standards will isolate them. Afraid that peace comes with emptiness. But listen closely. Loneliness doesn't come from being alone. Loneliness comes from being surrounded by people who don't see you. Loneliness comes from shrinking in rooms where you don't belong anymore. Loneliness comes from abandoning yourself repeatedly. Solitude with self-respect is not loneliness. It's sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, the right people can finally find you, because they're not looking for the old version anymore. They're responding to the new frequency. Teaching people how to treat you also changes how you move in the world. You stop oversharing with people who haven't earned your trust. You stop explaining your dreams to people committed to misunderstanding them. You stop giving emotional access to people who don't handle it with care. You become selective, intentional, rooted, not closed, not hardened, just wise. Wisdom looks like restraint. Wisdom looks like pause before response. Wisdom looks like choosing not to engage in dynamics that drain you. Wisdom looks like walking away without announcing it. And let me be clear, walking away doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you finally cared about yourself too. You can love people deeply and still choose distance. You can wish someone well and still revoke access. You can forgive and still move on. Forgiveness is internal. Access is earned. That distinction will save you. Some of you are still waiting for an apology, still hoping for closure, still believing that if they just understood how much they hurt you, they would change. Release that. Closure doesn't come from other people changing. It comes from you choosing differently. It comes from accepting what is. It comes from trusting what you felt. It comes from no longer needing validation to move forward. You don't need them to admit it. You don't need them to explain. You don't need them to acknowledge your pain. Your healing does not require their participation. And when you truly understand that, your power settles in, quietly, firmly, unshakably. Teaching people how to treat you isn't a performance. It's a lifestyle. It's how you show up when no one is clapping. It's how you choose when it would be easier to revert. It's how you stay loyal to yourself even when old versions of you come knocking. And they will. Old patterns, old connections, old temptations, old dynamics dressed up as nostalgia. But you'll feel the difference now. Your body will tell you. Your energy will pull back. Your spirit will say no before your mouth does. Trust that. That's your alignment speaking. You're not becoming difficult. You're becoming discerning. You're not losing people. You're losing illusions. And what remains after illusions fall is truth, is peace, is self-respect that doesn't waver. And there's still one more layer to this. One more place where everything comes together. You made it to the final layer. And I want you to recognize something before we close this chapter. You didn't just listen. You stayed, you absorbed, you let something shift. And that matters more than you realize. Because teaching people how to treat you isn't just about the outside world. It's about the relationship you're finally committing to on the inside. Here's where everything locks in. You stop asking, what will they think? And you start asking, what will it cost me if I ignore myself again? That question changes everything. Because the truth is, every time you betray yourself to keep someone else comfortable, you pay for it later. You pay with resentment. You pay with exhaustion. You pay with confusion. You pay with a quiet sadness you can't always explain. And eventually, you pay with disconnection from yourself. But when you choose yourself early, when you honor the discomfort up front, you save yourself years of emotional debt. This is what maturity looks like. Not reactions, not explosions, but discernment. It's choosing differently before things fall apart. It's recognizing misalignment without needing a dramatic ending. It's walking away when something no longer feels clean in your spirit. No villain, no victim, just truth. Teaching people how to treat you means you stop auditioning for roles you've outgrown. You stop proving your value. You stop overgiving in hopes of being chosen. You stop explaining why you deserve basic respect. Because the right people don't require convincing. They require presence. They meet you where you stand. And if someone can only meet you where you kneel, they don't belong in the next chapter of your life. Here's another thing that settles once you really integrate this. You stop rushing connection. You let people reveal themselves. You let time do the filtering. You observe consistency. You notice effort. You watch how people respond to your boundaries, not your words. And instead of trying to correct them, you decide accordingly. That's power. Quiet power. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that doesn't argue. The kind that doesn't need to be understood. You also stop romanticizing potential. You stop falling in love with who someone could be if they just tried harder, if they healed, if they changed, if they chose you differently. Potential is not a promise, and it is not your responsibility to unlock it. You honor what is. You choose based on reality, not hope. And that alone will elevate your entire life. Some of you needed to hear this part most. You are not hard to love. You were just loving people who required you to be smaller to stay. You are not asking for too much. You were asking the wrong people. You are not broken because you care deeply. You just didn't have boundaries protecting that depth. Now you do. And that depth, with boundaries, becomes discernment, becomes wisdom, becomes magnetism. Teaching people how to treat you also means you stop revisiting doors you already closed energetically. You don't reopen conversations just because nostalgia knocks. You don't entertain mixed signals out of boredom or loneliness. You don't respond just to be polite. You move with intention. You move with self-trust. You move like someone who knows their energy is sacred, because it is. And here's the most grounding truth of all. You don't need to master this perfectly. You're allowed to learn. You're allowed to adjust. You're allowed to catch yourself mid-pattern and choose differently. Growth isn't never slipping. Growth is not abandoning yourself when you notice the slip. Every time you choose yourself a little faster, that's progress. Every time you walk away a little earlier, that's healing. Every time you honor your discomfort instead of silencing it, that's self-respect strengthening. And one day, you'll look back at what you used to tolerate, and it won't hurt anymore. It won't anger you. It won't shame you. It will simply remind you how far you've come. You won't crave closure. You won't need apologies. You won't wonder what you did wrong, because you'll be rooted, whole, clear, at peace, and peace is the loudest boundary of all. So as you move forward, move slowly, move honestly, move in ways that don't require you to betray yourself to belong. The people meant for you will feel the difference, and the ones who aren't will fall away without force. That's alignment. That's self-respect embodied. That's teaching people how to treat you without saying a word. I'm glad you stayed until the end. That tells me something about you. You're ready. Ready to live differently. Ready to choose yourself without apology. Ready to protect your peace like it matters. Because it does. If this message resonated, if it put words to something you've been feeling, join the movement. Subscribe to Echoes of Enlightenment Oracle. We're walking this path together.